Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning. And today we've got another new shell that a lot of you guys have been requesting for us to test. And I'm definitely excited to see what they can do, because they should give us a pretty devastating looking result. But as for those shells I got today, I brought out some of these, the Rocky Ridge TSS loads. But these ones are their 20 gauge, 3 inch, 2 ounce payload of TSS 9s. The box doesn't claim a velocity, but I will look it up and put it over here on the screen for you guys. Either way, a 2 ounce payload of TSS 9s in a 20 gauge load is a pretty stout shell. That's a lot of pellets flying down range. So if they've built this shell good enough to handle it, then it should be a pretty ridiculous looking pattern. So we'll see what these could do through today's setup. And as for that setup today, I brought out my Stevens 301 20 gauge. It's got a 26-inch barrel on it, but for a choke, I went with the Cabela's Blackmaxx 575 constriction, and I kind of did that for a couple reasons starting out here. Number one, it's a $40-ish choke that has been super impressive so far in our testing. Any kind of relatively decent shell we've run through it has performed fantastic. Plus, it's a 575 constriction, and 2 ounces worth of payload in a 20 gauge is a lot of pellets. So this little bit more open constriction might actually handle that much payload a little better than something that's tighter. So in thought process, this choke should give us a good baseline to work off of. And of course, we will be testing other choke combos and stuff with these as well. But I figured this will be a pretty decent starting point. But as for our test today, everything is the same as usual. The turkey paper's at 40 yards, and I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity. So let's head over here and take our shot and see what kind of pattern we can get from these Rocky Ridge 2 ounce TSS 9s through the 301 and Blackmaxx 575. It's a pretty stout shell when it comes to specs, so can it be a pretty stout performer downrange? I'm thinking it probably will be, but let's take our shot and see what we can get. Alright, so that shell gave us 1155 through the chrono. Again, I'll pop up on screen here what their website actually claims for a velocity, but I'd imagine we're pretty close there. And 1155 is about what I would expect out of a 2 ounce 20 gauge shell. So I'd say we're looking pretty decent for a velocity up here, but what kind of a pattern did they give us down there at 40? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and I gotta say, that is a lot of shot flying down range for a 20 gauge shell. I mean, 2 ounces, that's a 12 gauge payload all day long, and it looks like it too. Our central core might have been just a touch to the right of that bird's head there, but still a very dead turkey all day long, and that is a lot of pellets on that Birchwood Casey, even though that BC target did not really do what it was supposed to do, and a lot of them are still kind of junk, but you can clearly see he is absolutely covered in pellets. So for a core, very nice and uniform, very even there. There's no question about it. There's nowhere on that entire turkey paper that bird can move to without getting hit with at least 50 pellets or more. So yeah, that core, beautiful looking without a doubt. Outside of that, we do open it up just a little bit around the edges, but it still pretty much maintains a relatively even spread of them. There are a couple smaller voids, like right over here, there might be one, but overall, it does give you a little bit of leeway without being completely blown open or splotchy. We might have a couple of flyers, mainly down there at the bottom, but that doesn't really surprise me, nor does it hurt the pattern whatsoever here. I mean, that is completely devastating for a 20 gauge shell. And dare I say, potentially a little bit of overkill as well. I mean, if you're shooting a 20 gauge shell, chances are you're probably doing it because it's a little bit lighter in the recoil department. And these shells, although they might not be the worst 20 gauge shell I've ever shot, they are a little more stout than your average 20 gauge turkey shell as well, just with that much payload. So looking at the pattern as a whole here, the very fringe edges of the pattern might have a couple little splotchy areas on the very, very far edges. Now, of course, we're kind of nitpicking at that point because that is clearly a 40+ yard turkey pattern, but that does tell me that potentially if we go to something like a 570, that might pretty much be the perfect constriction for these. This gave us a perfectly usable pattern that I would not be scared in the slightest to turkey hunt with, but I'm definitely curious to see what they'll do through just a touch more constriction. I've got a 572 HS strut choke, I've got a 570 tight wad, and those two might really do pretty well with these and just bring in those very, very outskirt edge pellets and even it up just a little bit. We don't really need any hotter of a core, but I don't know. Clearly at that point, we're pulling at straws here because this is still a very deadly pattern, and I think it pretty much speaks for itself. So overall, very impressed with these so far, and I have have no doubt we can continue to get some devastating patterns from these through some other chokes as well. So I don't think we have much room to complain about that pattern today. That would absolutely crush a turkey at 40 yards. And here's the wad from that shell. Immediately, this appears to be another one of those, I think they're called low bore contact wads from Ballistic Products, if I'm not mistaken. They got these ribs along the side here, and we know these are some fantastic wads through our testing, and I clearly think it did its job. But we have quite a few pellets still stuck down in the bottom there, which I definitely don't like to see. Now, clearly with a 2-ounce load of 20 gauge, having those 10 or so pellets stuck down in there absolutely did not make a difference here today, and chances are that might be because we have such a high payload as to why they're stuck down in there, because we typically don't see that with these wads. But at the end of the day, I still think it performed perfectly fine for us, and we know it's a good wad, so it should continue to perform well for us as well. We'll just have to see if we still have pellets stuck down in there through other chokes or not. But no concerns from me here today at all. Looks pretty much like I'd expect it to. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? That is complete devastation for a 20 gauge shell all day long. I mean, any decently loaded TSS option in a 20 gauge is going to give you some pretty nice performance, but 2 ounces worth of it, that's a straight up 12 gauge payload in a 20 gauge shell. So yeah, that is more than capable at 40 yards. And I don't think we were too far off when it came to choke constriction either at that 575. We definitely did not over constrict these, and judging by the very outskirt edges of that pattern, we might be able to go down to 572 or 570, something like that, and get pretty much the perfect pattern out of these. If we go down a lot tighter, sure, I think we can tighten the core up, but we might start blowing the pattern open with that much constriction compared to that much shot payload in a 20 gauge shell. I don't know, but I'd say we're off to a very strong start here, and really, I don't think we can complain too much about that performance. That is completely devastating at 40 yards, no question about it. So as always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected out of these? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of the Rocky Ridge shells or their 20 gauge 2 ounce loading? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? And what other choke combos do you want to see us run these shells through? I've got a few ideas, but let me know what you want to see. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.